My boss thought he could bully me. He never saw this coming. USA revenge story. Small towns have a way of making you feel like everyone knows your business. In my case, it wasn't just my neighbors who knew everything. My boss made sure the whole town knew where I stood in his little kingdom. This happened in a tiny town in the Midwest, USA. We're talking about the kind of place where there's one main street, one diner everyone eats at. And if you wave at someone, there's a 90% chance you've known them since childhood. I had been working at a local supply store for about 3 years. The pay wasn't great, but it was steady, and I liked most of the people. The only problem? Tom Harper, the store manager. Tom was the kind of guy who thought a title gave him the right to control you. He'd swagger around in his pressed shirt, barking orders at everyone like he owned the place. In reality, the store was part of a chain, but Tom acted like we all owed him our livelihoods. The constant humiliation. It started with small digs. If I stacked boxes too slowly, he'd clap his hands and say, "Come on, son, this ain't nap time." If I made a suggestion, he'd laugh and say, "You let me do the thinking, all right?" But over time, he got bolder. One day, I found out he'd been telling other employees that I was too dumb to ever get promoted. I heard it from a coworker who looked genuinely uncomfortable even repeating it. And then there was the money. We were all supposed to be paid for our overtime. The company policy was clear, time and a half after 40 hours. But somehow, Tom always found a reason to adjust my hours down on the schedule, so my paycheck didn't reflect the actual time I worked. I confronted him once, and he just smirked. Maybe if you worked faster, you wouldn't need overtime. That's when I realized this wasn't just petty, it was theft. The breaking point. It all came to a head on a freezing December night. A blizzard had rolled in, but Tom insisted we stay late to reorganize the inventory. By the time we finished, it was almost midnight, and the snow was so thick you couldn't see the road. I drove home on icy streets, my hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel, thinking, why am I killing myself for a man who doesn't respect me? That night, I decided I wasn't going to just quit. I was going to end him. The research phase. In small towns, information travels fast, but sometimes it travels in whispers. I started talking to older employees, people who'd been there before me. Turns out, Tom had a history. He'd been transferred from another store 2 years ago after some accounting errors. The more I dug, the more I found. Overtime theft, safety violations, even rumors of him making under-the-table deals with suppliers. I started keeping records, every shift, every time I stayed late, every time he adjusted my hours. I collected statements from coworkers who'd been shorted, too. I didn't just want him in trouble. I wanted him gone. The plan. I reached out to the U.S. Department of Labor. They have a wage and hour division that handles this kind of thing. I sent them everything. My records, copies of my time cards, even text messages from Tom asking us to clock out early but keep working. Then I contacted the company's corporate HR department anonymously, attaching all the evidence and letting them know the Labor Department was already involved. The beauty of this was simple. Once the feds are looking at you, corporate panic sets in fast. The storm hits. It took about 2 months for everything to come together. One cold February morning, 2 men in suits walked into the store, followed by a federal labor investigator. They went straight into Tom's office. We could all hear the voices, calm at first, then louder. Tom came out once, red-faced, and barked at us to get back to work. But the investigator just followed him, clipboard in hand. By lunch, they were gone. By closing time, Tom was in the parking lot, slamming his car door and peeling out onto Main Street. The next day, a notice went up on the bulletin board. Tom Harper is no longer employed with this company. The aftermath. The company didn't just fire him, they had to pay back wages to every employee he'd stolen overtime from. For me, it was nearly $3,000. For others, it was even more. A month later, we got a new manager, a woman named Sarah who actually treated us like human beings. She reinstated proper breaks, made sure overtime was logged correctly, and even brought in free coffee on Fridays. As for Tom, word around town was that he tried to get a job at another store in the chain, but the investigation had blacklisted him. Eventually, I heard he moved 2 states away, probably to start over where nobody knew his name. My quiet satisfaction. Sometimes I think back to those nights when I drove home exhausted, wondering if I'd ever get out from under his thumb. And then I remember the look on his face when those investigators showed up. Revenge doesn't always have to be loud or messy. Sometimes it's a quiet, calculated plan that hits exactly where it hurts: the wallet, the reputation, the pride. And Tom, he lost all three. If you liked this story, hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe, because I've got more real-life revenge tales coming your way.